Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fifth community call for the Informatics for Community Food Resilience Project. And we have a couple of fun updates to share today, as well as a couple of reminders and requests that we're hoping we can get out. So, at least the formal part of today's call should again be fairly brief. I'm glad to see some folks on the call today who are from the software team. I'll be sharing some of the work that we've done on that front. And then we'll give a little bit of a preview of what we're thinking about with the consumer team as we start to grow. And I know that there are folks here from the consumer team as well. And so that's pretty exciting. So I want to share my screen and then we can see what we've got in the menu for today. So I'll give you a brief status update, and I'm not going to go through the website for that, or at least I'll put it up and you can see where we're at. We are actively recruiting folks for interviews, and so as always, if you know of folks who are available for a quick interview, whether a farmer or farm supporter, let us know. We're still doing that. We should be scheduling the first round of farm supporter interviews actually in the next week, and so that's pretty exciting because we should at least be able to start to hear some thoughts from folks that are not necessarily us on these calls. The community library continues to grow, and so we have quite a few resources in there. I know a lot of folks have been sending them to us as well, and so I thank you for sending them our way. We're trying to start sorting through this, and so you will see today our first effort on the software side of things is trying to think about actually beginning to sort the software pieces that are within our library. I just noticed in the chat a couple of folks said they lost video. Can you hear me or?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm not having that problem, but I've just sent out the phone call-in instructions,
Okay.
which it should be something that they can link up to. So
Okay. All right. Cool. So things are going strong on at least recruitment end, but we certainly can use some help, and so I'll come back to those in reminders. So with that, I want to switch over to showing you some of the things that the software team has been up to. Oops, I just clicked on a weird button. Some of the things that the software team has been up to give you a sense of where we're at. So I'm actually going to switch over to Airtable to show you where we're at. And so if I bring this over, we now have about 28 software in our library. These range from things that are for just traditional farm management, including some that are sort of specifically for food hubs. As you can see, we're still putting together some of this data. And so, this is what you all have access to. And so you should be able to see this full list. And so I've just subsetted a section of those for what I'm showing you right now. So within the software list, what we're beginning to do is start to think about how we actually want to evaluate them for different types of user groups. And so we have a team of about 5 people who are beginning to actually look at some of these pieces. So I'm actually now going to just switch back to the website so I can show you what we have. So I've activated the Software for Local Foods group, Software for Local Foods focus area, which details what we're up to. And so we have a couple of different things that we're trying to achieve with this group. So we have 3 short-term outcomes. The first one is to be able to match the needs of farmers and consumers with appropriate tooling, which requires us to take a step back and actually do an evaluation of the tools. The second is to then be able to identify opportunities for design, because I know that we really want to get that design team kicked off. And so we're hoping that this activity will at least be a good pairing to the interviews that we have already set up. And then the third is to identify broader infrastructural challenges. And that would sort of result in us simply being able to make recommendations about, hey, here's what the tech can't do, here's what the tech can't do because of X, Y, and Z larger challenges, whether it's thinking about, infrastructural, processing, societal, and other non-digital sort of real world challenges, so to speak. So there are 4 types of user groups that we're focusing on when thinking about the software evaluation. And I'd like to preface this by saying, one of the things that we've seen with a lot of the software that is out there is it has been very focused on trying to see if we can get farmers online, which is awesome because that was kind of like what we needed at the very beginning was to actually try and see what tools are working for different kinds of farmers. But there are three other user groups that are part of the sort of the web of things that is the local foods community, and that includes farm coordinators, which we're sort of generally describing as folks who are handling the logistics of aggregating food for distribution to consumers. We've got consumers themselves, people who are trying to find local food. And then we also have consumer coordinators. So these are folks, whether you're a food hub or you're just coordinating local purchasing, but these are folks who are trying to actually bring together groups of users. And so while we're looking through the different kinds of software, we'll be evaluating them with respect to their usability and utility for farmers, farmer coordinators, consumers, and consumer coordinators. So this document, just a quick heads up, is going to be is going to be a live document. So as we're going through this process, I will be updating it, and so you'll notice it's pretty thin on details right now, or at least I think it's a little thin on details. But hopefully, this gives you enough of a sense of what's going on, so you can see where we're going and perhaps even join us in this process. So where are we at? A group of us met this past Monday, and so you can see the leadership group down the bottom. I believe I've introduced both Sarah George and Jamie before, and we have one more person who I believe will be joining us, but we're just waiting on some confirmation, and so hopefully I'll be able to introduce them to the full group next week. And so this is the group of people who are sort of behind this entire document. So right now we're at the stage of aggregating software reviews. So if you go back to the resource library, you'll notice there are some resources in there which were not necessarily software themselves, but reviews of software. And so an example here would be, this was a document that was put together by the National Farmers Coalition that describes a variety of different that's very tiny, but I won't bother opening it up right now. You can always come back and look at it. That will show you that in which they have reviewed different types of software, again, primarily from the farmer's perspective. And so we're starting with these five resources to think about how, what have folks already identified as critical functionality for farmers, and then build off from there. So Jamie appropriately mentioned during the meeting that we want to avoid creating yet another tool or yet another process. And so we're trying to have that be sort of the boundary for our work, and try to remember that the outcome of this is not to necessarily add yet another review of tools, but to provide for a way for people to have, an updatable live database of tools that they can search and filter as they see fit. So this week, as we're moving forward to our next meeting, we'll be thinking about the development of some evaluation criteria, and I'll give you a little glimpse of what that looks like. And so we're starting with those initial software reviews. We're scraping those for all the different criteria that were in there, and then we're going to start beginning to add what types of functionality we think our other three user groups are looking for. And as we start to have the interviews going, we should be also then getting some valuable input directly from farmers and farm supporters about what kinds of things are missing in the technological landscape. So I had mentioned the software list so far. This is available. If you see missing software, if there are things that you think people are using that are interesting, as always, please, I encourage you to come to the Food and Tech Library and submit a resource. So a little bit about these criteria. So I mentioned that we had started with, and so you'll see this is very much a work in progress right now, but we started with the criteria that were within these different resources. And so I actually should be able to open it up here a little better, I believe. So if I just software reviews, and so, you can see, I definitely picked the largest one, so it might take a second to load. But if you've had a moment to go through any of these documents, you'll see that a lot of folks have been putting together some like really rich comparison tables of different kinds of software and how they perform with respect to different kinds of functionality, a lot of information about questions to consider. So, that ranges from that sort of model. I know that this at least was one that one of the folks in our leadership, Sarah George, was actually responsible for creating, where again, it's super rich information. In this particular case, she mentioned that it is a little bit out of date. And so we might need to double check some of these things. But we're hoping to provide, have in that database a combination of both, what functionalities are there, but also be able to put together some very basic ratings, with the caveat of we don't necessarily want to go through a full data verification process because that can get a little heavy. So we are going to try and keep it fairly slim and trim with a focus on, what do people need in the short term while flagging some of those longer term needs for later consideration. And so, the types of categories that we have in here, while yes, we have some software basics, include things like costs to producers, and you can see the origin of these data, of these variables in here as well. Some criteria around usability, a lot of information around payment methods. And so right now I'm in the process of actually going through and reducing duplication while the full team starts to think about new types of variables that we should be considering, particularly from the perspective of farmer coordinators, consumers, and consumer coordinators. And so I mostly show this to the full group as an invitation to say that if you have ideas or thoughts on how we should be going about this, or if you have criteria that you think are interesting, you can either send us an email and join the leadership team as usual, or if you just want to send us just send us an email with some thoughts, or we can always set up a call to chat a little bit more. I would be open to that. But I did want to at least take a moment to just at least pose to this group that's on the call today the following question about what types of things you think the user groups that we've defined as might need, or if you even think that these user groups adequately capture what you see out in the landscape. So I want to pause for a moment and see if anyone has any thoughts on this, both the process and these questions so far. Okay, I know we're also
I
having, oh yes, please go ahead.
oh my just one thought was I wonder particularly with the two coordinators groups I guess I have to assume there'd be allowances for like individuals to float between both of those. Okay.
Yes. Sorry, I don't know if your uh, audio cut or if that was the end of the question. So I will just respond.
Sorry, yeah, that was
No
it.
worries, no
I guess it
worries.
wasn't really a question. I just yeah, but just yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you bring up a super valuable point. In the same way that, farmers are consumers and consumers are farmers, I suspect that there will be lots of overlap between these four groups. This is primarily supposed to allow for us to at least start to think critically about when I'm wearing the role of coordination, but thinking about farmers, what types of things would I be looking for, right? So at least in the writing here, I briefly described a couple of examples where somebody who is doing some coordination, a market manager, for example, might be looking for a tool that allows them to, yes, coordinate farmers, bring them together online, but also provide consumers with aggregate purchasing options. And similarly, when you're coordinating a group of consumers, and that's the type of there, you might be looking for functionality, for instance, that allows for you to manage many individual orders as well as optimized distribution. And so there'll likely be overlap with the desired features between these four groups, but this just allows for us to at least make sure that we're actively flagging things that each of those groups will need. Yeah,
Right, that makes sense.
cool. So if we don't have a lot of immediate thoughts just yet, because I know these are some pretty broad questions, I've provided at least two options for you to be able to provide input into this process. And so hopefully as we're going down this next week, we should be able to provide an update on what those evaluation criteria are shaping up to be a little bit more. So maybe you'll have a little bit more to chew on. But if you want to keep up with what's going on with this particular group, I'm going to try and keep this document as live as possible. So no promises on it being updated daily, but at least weekly, it will have updates on where we're at. Okay, any other thoughts or questions on the software team's work so far? Otherwise, I will move on to the consumer team. Okay, cool. So the other piece that we're kicking off this week is the consumer team. So here you'll find community food pathways. We haven't yet actually produced content for this, but I did want to at least take a moment to introduce the leadership team, which is what we have been really focused on trying to put together in the last couple of days. And I believe we have both Pam Sherman and Abigail Darwin on the call right now. And so I'm not sure, Pam, if your audio is working yet. Yes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Nodding. Yes. I wonder if you might want to take a moment and introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm from Colorado. I live in the mountains west of Boulder at 8,300 feet and have a large garden, small farmed for about 30 years with my husband. So we're like subsistence. We kind of walk in between gardeners and farmers. So we're not on the commercial side of things. Some of us have recently started a Colorado local food system and regenerative agriculture hub group on Facebook, and within 2 weeks it's gotten hundreds of member groups and member organizations and people really coming together to share in an extremely haphazard fashion, as is Facebook, to connect and to share more of what they're doing and try to make sense of what's going on right now. And I'm extremely grateful to be working with this particular project because I think that it will help bring some organization and order to what we're doing and process to what we're doing and provide and really just cut through a lot of chaos to provide what we need. And I'm a writer, and I write and teach on these topics, and so I am hoping to be able to do that and be of use to this group.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Pam, and we're so glad to have you on board. I also wanted to invite Abigail, if you'd like to introduce yourself and say hi to the group.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. I'm going to share my video, but I have to, let's see, it's loading. I have to call in. I'm not super tech savvy and I can't figure out. So, hey, y'all. I'm Abigail, and I am in Athens, Georgia. So right now I am in Dr. Jen Thompson's at UGA Social Sustainability of Agro-Food Systems Lab, and I'm getting my master's in crop and soil science. Previously, I've worked for the past 3 years for the Athens Farmers Market. We have a really awesome, thriving local food system here. So worked with that. I've worked on small-scale farms for many seasons, and now I'm turning the wheel back into a more academic approach. My research right now, I was talking with Juliet earlier today, and I think may overlap with some of the goals and things that you guys are trying to accomplish in this consumer-based project, but I am looking at grassroots or community-derived programs within the rural Southeast that have arisen to address issues of food insecurity within their own communities and to document them in a way that creates a template or identifies larger models that other communities can use to self-organize as well.
Mm-hmm.
So just returning the knowledge back to the communities. I've lived in the South for the majority of my life, and this is where all my connections are. These are people that I love, so I am super stoked to be doing anything that that gives back to these people.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We're super excited to have you join us. And I think,
Thank you. I am too.
yeah, Jen guided us to the right person. So yeah, this is going to be great. I also wanted to take a moment because I know Juliet, I don't know if we've ever talked about your work with sort of local communities. And so I wanted to give you a moment also to see if you had anything you'd like to add, especially since you'll
Oh,
be leading the charge a little bit more on the community food networks group.
sure, yeah. So spent my passion in this area came from working with uh, grassroots sustainable agriculture communities and the formation of local food networks. Back when it was it went from being a hobby to taking over my and like 10 years of my life in academia. And I uh, have worked with university-based community gardens and permaculture groups, or and also just broader sustainable agriculture groups. I worked with communities in Florida and Central Florida, in and around Orlando, and I also worked with community in Southern California. And I've spent so much time meeting with very motivated people in starting local food organizations and helping them address and understand and address their information challenges. And so this is where my heart lies. So I'm really excited to be able to work with other people who are also interested in the same kind of thing.
Awesome. Thank you. Um, So that's currently the team that we have put together. We have not met yet as a group, and so I think this might actually be the first time that all four of us are on the call together. But we are hoping to set up the first meeting for this particular group in the coming 2 weeks. And so I wanted to just give you a little bit of a background to folks who are not necessarily part of that group about what the motivations here are. I think in the original concept paper, you'll recognize this was the original image describing what this group is going to be focused around. And so it's really thinking about how do we map pathways for individuals, communities, and organizations to find food, coordinate logistics, and deal with all these other challenges related to, trying to actually find food in a local arena. And so part of this effort will include, yes, looking at existing work, but also a lot of looking at what parallel efforts are. And so part of the reason why I'm really excited about the contributions folks are making to the library is because the library also does include resources that are examples of how different kinds of communities are doing coordination. And so what we're hoping in the long term, or in the short term, rather, I should have said, is to be able to try and garner some of these practices and identify, both missing pieces as things that we should then go ahead and think about, engaging in a critical design process in that next phase of this project, as well as trying to think about how can we glean best practices to be able to share with a wider community. So that would be sort of fairly analogous to the work that we're doing in the software mapping, but this is really more thinking about mapping of how consumers are coordinating, both amongst themselves and with other types of stakeholders within the community food system. And I know that we are there are a couple of questions that at least Juliet put some questions together for us to consider for the when starting to think about the consumer group. I would like to pose these to the group. I know we're a fairly quiet group, but I think I'd start by just putting them out there and seeing if you have any thoughts. And what we're really trying to get a better sense of is to hear about, in your context, what the consumer challenges are, and trying to hear from you about who you think is doing different kinds of work that is interesting and useful to support local consumers. So if anyone has any thoughts, please pipe up. Otherwise, you can always email us with information. I don't know if I heard an unmute, so I'll pause for a moment. Cool.
I do have a few thoughts if anybody doesn't have anything they want to say right now.
Mm-hmm.
So in Athens, we've done a really great job of returning to local food during this pandemic. So a lot of my friends are farmers, and they're not having a single issue giving their food or, people purchasing their food. But what they're concerned about is that previously through the farmers markets that they were working out of, there's a lot of initiatives and food prescription programs and SNAP doubling, things that were previously helping other members of the community, not just the privileged members of the community who can walk into a farmer's market and buy $5 bunches of carrots.
Yeah.
And it's been really difficult to organize reaching out to that community. Firstly, because it's already a vulnerable population in Athens' particular context. And oftentimes, they're undocumented, or they have these certain health issues that make them nervous about interacting with people, even to get their basic needs. And so that's one of the issues that we face in Athens, is like how to reach that population. And we don't have a solution. That's just a challenge.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up a very important point, and I'm glad to hear it at least mentioned on this call. I think in an earlier discussion with Pam, I think we also talked about the challenge with the digital divide and how that does at times lead to those who have privilege being able to access things even better, where those who might not necessarily share those have those affordances, often get left out. And so I think one of the things that is important for us to consider is how to make sure that we are not just designing for a privileged group of people, but trying to think about consumers as in everybody. So thinking about food equity and justice, I think, was something that somebody else had brought up in a conversation about this, and how do we make sure that we're not inadvertently skewing who we support in this project. So thank you for your thoughts, Abigail. Anyone else?
I have thoughts to add, but I would really rather hear from other people first, because I know that we're going to be having long discussions on this. And so
No worries.
I want to hear what everyone else has to say first, if anyone else has anything to say.
I think it might be you, Pam.
Okay. So I'm just going to address the two questions that I see up on the screen. What are the consumer challenges, and who in your community is doing work to support consumers? I think I'll address the second one first. The minute that we were on shutdown, our local farmers, or small farmers, were able to, a lot of them were able to pivot, and they immediately, for instance, a friend of mine who's a multiple award-winning chef and has a farm that feeds his restaurants. He turned his restaurants into stores, and he turned his kitchen into like kind of a ready-made takeout grocery. You can get pasta and flour and that kind of thing instead of. And then there were some takeout meals, and they also started doing pop-up farmers markets, pop-up pantries in different parts of the city, and instantly doing deliveries and engaging delivery services. And the farmers market, which is very, very strong here, and which is also, I believe, the aegis for the Denver farmers markets, just gave away huge amounts of food. Just gave it away, and there's large ranch here that has just been giving away tens of thousands of pounds of meat.
Yeah.
You have to sign up, and it's all very orderly. But people are, and then there are gleaning organizations, which are really wonderful. And then in terms of reaching the people who are on the digital divide, who don't have computers, the intermediary organizations, the food banks, and other organizations that interface with the people who need the food but don't have computers, and with the farmers, they are providing the interface. So they're the ones that we need to talk to in terms of helping to reach the people who don't have computers.
Yeah.
So that's just a little bit about what's going on here.
No, I think the thing that I find very challenging and interesting about this is, we often think about the socio-technical aspects of or rather the social aspects of technology. And it's one of those things where we can only do so much by designing tools, but if we don't necessarily think about what types of social practices are happening, what types of non-digital things are happening to actually allow for people to find each other, we wouldn't necessarily be meeting the right people's needs. And so I think it's, at least for this particular working group, I'm excited to focus more on what people are doing to coordinate with technology playing second fiddle and simply being there as something that might, if at all, help mediate these kinds of coordination processes and efforts.
Can I ask a follow-up question to Pam and Abigail? This is Andrew Flax from Purdue. I'm wondering about the availability of whatever protective equipment people are interested in for whoever is doing the actual food distributing, as well as, both from farmers to consumers and then from wherever consumers are getting it to people who are picking it up. What's the situation like in the places that you were working with? Do people have what they need? What sorts of things do people want?
Abigail, do you want to answer first?
Sure. Thank you, Pam. So in Athens, they're doing a lot of direct-to-porch deliveries. So farmers are actually dropping produce off on people's porches, and there's no interaction. The farmers market so we live in the South, and of course the South is immediately reopening, and so there was a big push for the farmers market to reopen, and they did, but they just opened on Saturday, and everybody is required to wash their hands before they come in. There's a hand washing station, one person for each family member, and then you're required to wear a mask and gloves, which if you don't bring your own mask and gloves, you can purchase a mask and gloves that are made there. There's been a lot of community organization around producing masks in Athens because we've had a shortage of masks at the hospital, and so the community members rose up to meet the needs, but now we have a surplus. And then farmers themselves have been taking a lot of protective measures. They've reduced their staff. They have started wearing PPE themselves while they're harvesting and cleaning the produce, and while they're delivering the produce as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but those are some of the initiatives that have been going on around here.
Yeah, I would say pretty much the same thing for here, too. If they do use PPEs, it would be gloves and masks. And again, it would depend, who they were working with and for, whether those were provided. Our community is not yet overstocked in terms of either of those items, but it is the community members have formed little groups and they're working at home making masks at least. I don't think you can make gloves, but so I think it's just case by case, and so that's sort of the PPEs that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Okay. So if there are no other thoughts on this just yet, I would like to take this as a moment to also provide a call for leadership and involvement. And so if you would like or know of folks who would like to provide perspectives on these topics, and just have, 2 hours to contribute only, please point them toward signing up for an interview. But if you have, let's say, 2 to 4 hours to contribute, and would like to join this group, there'll be a weekly call, just like with the software team, and of course you're welcome to join that one too. It'll be a weekly call to try and push the needle forward on the efforts in here, as well as then a couple of hours of work that might be sort of spread over 1 or 2 weeks. And so if you want to get involved, email us as usual. Otherwise, hang tight and you will still get all the information in these updates. Juliet, is there anything you'd like to add on the consumer team in particular, or anything else so far?
I guess if you are interested in getting involved, we haven't set the weekly meeting date yet. And so now's a great time to let us know you're interested because we can try to support your schedule.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to just run through a couple of requests and reminders and then open it back up for community discussion. So we are beginning to feel the overhead of becoming a medium-sized project. And so we're looking for project management support to help keep the project on track. And so right now we're particularly looking for three types of folks outside of participation in these groups. And so, one of the things that we need in order to be able to scale up the number of interviews we can actually handle is some funding. And so I will be putting together a NIFA grant, but it would also be helpful if, you wanted to focus on your region in particular and were interested in sort of spearheading a regional grant writing effort. We would be very much interested in talking with you about that. We are, as always, looking for regional recruitment coordinators. We're pretty well staffed for that one here in the Midwest, but we're looking for representation in other regions. And I believe if you, just as a quick reminder of what those regions are, we have them, oops, my bad. We have them listed in here. So that's the Midwest, the Northeast, the Southeast, the Plains, and the Pacific West. And if you remember, we are staggering work in each of those regions. So we have a little bit of time to get those folks on deck, but it would be lovely to at least know if someone is interested in helping with regional recruitment. And last but not least, this website is currently being managed by a very small group of people right here. So that's me and Juliet. And so if you are interested in helping create website content, whether it's, turning up to meetings and helping to write some of the content for each of these pages, or even help with sort of managing the mailing list and sending out some of the newsletters, that's super low effort work, but we would welcome some support on that front as well. Otherwise, fear not, we will keep doing all of the things because we're very excited about this project as always. And thank you, Donna. I saw you mentioned in the chat that you can help with grant writing. So we'll be sure to reach out to you within the week to try and see how we can move forward on that front. So awesome. Just a reminder, and this I think is more for folks who are watching the video than necessarily folks on the call today. We'd love for you to sign up for an interview. We will call you to schedule a time. We're starting with the Midwest, but we would love to then be able to move forward with the Northeast and Pacific West. So we're looking for 2-hour interviews, which can be split up into 2 one-hour sessions. So if you'd like to sign up for an interview, please go ahead and follow that link that's on the screen. We're also still actively recruiting, and so this is for everyone, including those on the call. The flyers and text are available. There's a tweet, there's an Instagram post, all of the usual social media things. Please feel free to also just send direct introduction emails to me or also to Juliet. And so, please spread the word. We're hoping to hear from as many voices as we humanly can. And so I look forward to hearing from people who sign up. And then the last one is to just submit resources as you find them to the Food and Tech Community Library. I do want to point out that we are expanding the types of resources based on what we're getting. And so, if it's just an article even, please feel free to submit articles that you're seeing that are pointing out particularly critical challenges. If you're seeing information guides, and so this is the full set of resources, and I'll actually update the library page today to reflect this. So it's not necessarily just, software and software reviews, but a wide range of things that we're hoping to put together and then be able to actually filter and put out back into the community. So please feel free to submit a resource once again on the website. So for next week, we'll give you some updates on the technology efforts, the software group. I'm hoping, we need to confirm the time, but I'm hoping we'll be able to meet on Monday at 11 a.m. That's at least when we last met, but if you'd like to join that group, let me know. The consumer group will be scheduling a call within the next 2 weeks. So again, if you'd like to join that, let us know. And outside of that, we'll have the next community call this time next Wednesday at 3 p.m. on hopefully WebEx, but we'll see. There might be some changes, so stay tuned. And so we'll also be looking into the MailChimp issue to try and figure out the spam issue. Yes, Juliet.
Yes, could you please clarify that these are Eastern times, since we
Yes,
do have a national audience?
I should
Yes.
do that. I will start making sure. I tend to put all times in Eastern, which is my bias, and so I should start stating it on all of my slides. But thank you. So yes, Eastern time, next Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern. So from here, I will stop recording so that we can move into the community discussion component of today's call. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to stop recording.